The door was open, and the wind was coming through it, and she was standing on the other side. She filled the frame. She was massive in the dark, carrying something pressed to her chest with both arms, something small and wrapped. He did not know her. She did not speak. He looked at what she was carrying. He stepped back. That night changed what the ranch was for. He had been alone on the property for 2 years. Not alone the way a man is alone when the nearest town is a day's ride. Alone the way a house gets when it stops being a home and becomes a place to sleep. He knew the difference. He felt it in the way he moved through the rooms, the way he took up less space than he should have. He kept it running. He did not keep it warm. The ranch sat at the low end of a long slope. Nothing remarkable about it. A house. A barn that needed work on the east wall. The house was solid enough, the roof patched in 2 places, the chimney drawing well. A well that froze in the deepest part of winter, which this was. Fenced fields empty under snow, and in the far corner, one section of fence still broken from a storm long past. The posts tilted, and the wire slack and the ground too hard now to set them right until spring. The cattle were few. He had sold most of the herd in the months after she died, not because he needed the money exactly, but because he could not manage them alone, and did not want to hire anyone. Fewer cattle meant less to hold. He did what one man could do on a ranch in winter, which was keep things from dying rather than make things grow. He could fix fences. He could tend sick animals. He could do without company if it came to that. He had done it before. He rose before the sun. He worked until the cold drove him in. He ate alone and went to sleep and did it again. Her things were in the chest near the far wall. A folded blanket. A piece of cloth she had been working on before she took sick, something she had started in their first winter here. A few small items he could not look at directly and could not bring himself to put outside. They were in the chest. They were not gone. That was as far as he had gotten. The blanket had been blue. He could not remember now what she had intended it for. He had not opened the chest in some months. That was a question he did not ask himself anymore. That night, the cold was harder than it had been. He had felt it coming in the afternoon, the way the air changed before a real freeze, thicker somehow and very still. The wind had been at the walls since before dark. He had brought extra wood in, more than usual. He had checked the barn before the sun went down, made sure the remaining cattle had enough, made sure the door would latch. Then he had come back inside and built the fire up and sat in the chair nearest to it, and not done much of anything. The fire was the only light. He was not thinking about the fence. He was not thinking about the cattle. He was not thinking about her, not the sharp kind, not the kind that had weight and season to it. He was just sitting. The chair creaked once when he shifted. The wind pressed at the walls. The fire moved. Then there was a sound at the door. He crossed to the door and opened it. She was taller than the frame by a clear hand span. That was the first thing. She stood with her shoulders angled slightly in, carrying the cold in with her, the way cold clings to anything that has been out in it long enough. The green of her skin was dark in the cold air, the color of old stone left long in cold water. Her clothing was heavy, layered, some of it wrapped or tied rather than sewn, and there was frost on the shoulders of it, small white crystals that caught the firelight. He looked at what she was carrying before he looked at her face. She had both arms pressed against her chest, holding 2 shapes wrapped in cloth. The shapes were small, very small. One of them moved, a slow turn of a small head, and the other was still in a way that made something tighten in his chest. He stopped looking at her height and looked at the one that was not moving. She said something, a word or short phrase, in a voice that was low and careful. and it was not in any language he knew. Then she tried again. Something different, a syllable or two in his tongue, badly shaped, the way a word sounds when it has been heard, but not practiced. He did not understand it. He understood the infants. He stepped back. He did not say, "Come in." He did not gesture. He just moved away from the door and left the opening clear. And after a moment, she came through it. She had to angle her shoulders to fit. The room was not large, and she made it smaller. She moved to the fire the way something moves when it has learned to be careful about taking up space. The orc woman crouched near the hearth, keeping the twins pressed against her, and the firelight reached her face for the first time. He looked away. There were things to do. He got water on. He fed the fire. He pulled his coat from the hook by the door and draped it over the back of a chair near the hearth without saying anything, near enough that she could reach it. It was the warmest thing he had on the hook. Then he stood there a moment with his hand on the chest lid, and he opened it. The blanket was on top. Blue, folded the way she had left it. He took it out without letting himself look at it directly, the way you handle something that still has a little heat in it. And he brought it to where she was crouched by the fire and set it on the floor beside her. She looked at it. She looked at him. He went back to the fire. She did not thank him. He did not expect it. There was something happening between them that was not trust, not yet, but was not nothing either. They were two people and a fire, and two very small children who needed the fire to be hot, and that was enough for now. She arranged the blanket around them without putting them down. She held them against her chest and used the corner of it to wrap the smaller one more tightly. He watched her hands for a moment, then looked away again. He sat in the chair by the hearth and fed the fire when it needed feeding. She stayed on the floor. Outside, the wind pushed at the walls. Neither of them spoke. The twins were near heat for the first time since the cold had started, and whether they would still be breathing by morning was a thing neither of them could know. He did not think about the blanket. He did not think about what it had been. He thought about the fire. The night was long, and neither of them slept. He heated water on the stove and brought it to her in a bowl, and she knew what to do with it in ways he could not have said. She used it to warm the cloth she had around the twins. She worked without explaining herself, and he worked without asking. Between them, the fire. He added wood when it burned low. There was no language between them, and he did not try for one. The bowl needed refilling. He refilled it. The room got colder near the door. He rolled a rag against the gap at the bottom. Every time he came back to the fire, she was in the same position, or a slightly different one, checking the twins with her hands, adjusting the cloth. The smaller one she checked more often. He noticed that. She did not relax, even when things seemed stable. Her hands moved over them the same way, again and again, checking the same things. At some point in the deep part of the night, when the wind had dropped to something lower and steadier, she made a sound. Not a word. A sound that was short and controlled, the kind that comes out when something has gone wrong before you can stop it. He crossed the room. The smaller twin was cold in a way the other was not. He could feel it without touching her, just from the air near that side of the bundle. He did not know what to do about it. He looked at the woman, and she was already doing it, already opening the front of her garment and pulling the infant against her skin, holding her there against her chest, the two of them pressed together without space between them. He turned away. He did not look back at her. He went to the woodpile and brought more, and fed the fire until it was as high as it had been at the start of the night, and then a little higher. He sat in the chair and did not look at her. He listened. The fire breathed. Outside, the wind went on. There was no other sound from the room. After a while, longer than he would have liked, there was a sound from the bundle. Small, then another one. She went very still. For a long time, neither of them moved. It was not relief, exactly. Not the way he expected relief to look. She did not move. She did not make a sound. She just held the infant against her, and went as still as something that has been braced for a long time and is not yet sure the floor will hold. The infant made another sound, quieter, almost nothing. It was enough. He looked away. The fire moved. The other twin made a small complaint of its own, and she shifted to make room for both of them, and some of the tension went out of the room, the way smoke goes out, slowly, without a clear moment when it stops. Before dawn, both of them were breathing. He did not move for a while after that. Then he got up and put more wood on the fire, and went to stand near the window, looking at nothing, while she arranged them both back into the cloth and the blanket. In the morning he made a pot of something from what he had, grain mostly, with a little dried meat. He filled a bowl for himself and set a second one on the table without looking at where she was sitting. He set a spoon beside it. He picked up his own bowl and sat by the window and ate facing outside. When he got up to rinse his bowl, her bowl was empty. He put on his barn coat. The door was not locked. He had not locked it the night before, and he did not lock it now. He went out to see to the animals, and did not look back, the house behind him, and the woman in it, and the two small lives that were still breathing when he left. That was enough for one night. He went to tend the cattle. The cattle did not care what had happened in the house. They needed feed and water, and the same attention they needed every morning, and he gave it to them. He stayed in the barn longer than usual. Not hiding. There was work. The east wall still needed attention, and he checked the post he had braced last season. It was holding, but just. He added a cross brace, and by the time he was done, the sun had moved enough that it was past mid-morning. When he came back in, she was at the fire. The twins were in the blanket. He looked at them, not at her, and they were breathing, and the color in the smaller one's face was better than it had been. He said nothing. He went to the stove. They did not speak that day, or the next one. He returned to his routine, the way water finds the grooves it has already cut. Out before full light, animals first, whatever the ranch needed. Back inside for food, then out again, if there was more to do, which there was always more to do in winter. He did not change his routine for her presence. He was not sure what else to do. She stayed inside with the twins. When he came and went, she watched from near the fire. He noticed she had shifted from the night before, less tightly against the hearth, moving slightly toward the center of the room, the way a person moves when they are deciding how much space they are allowed to take up. He checked the twins from the doorway once, in the afternoon of the second day. He did not go to them. He stood at the threshold and looked, checking for the things you check for without language. Movement, color, breath. The smaller one was awake. One arm was free of the blanket. He nodded at nothing in particular and went back outside. She had seen him look. He knew that without looking at her. On the second afternoon, he came inside to eat, and she was at the window. She was looking out at the yard, at the barn, and the fence line, and the field beyond. Her eyes moved the way a person's eyes move when they are reading something, not the way they move when they are looking for danger. He sat down with his food. He did not say anything. He did not know what she was reading. He did not ask. She looked at the fence corner for a while, the broken section, posts tilted, wire slack. He saw her looking at it. He did not explain it. It had been broken since before winter, and it would be broken until the ground thawed, and he could set the posts right. He had made his peace with that. She looked at it the way someone looks at a problem they are working out. Then one of the twins made a sound. Not alarm, just a sound. She turned from the window and dealt with it. He watched without meaning to. She was competent in the way that people are competent when they have done something so many times that the body does it without the mind's help. Gentle in the way that large things sometimes are, when they know their own strength well enough to hold it back. The sound stopped. She arranged the twins back into the cloth and the blue blanket, and did not look at him to see if he had been watching. He had been. He ate his food. That evening he brought extra wood in and stacked it near the hearth. The woodpile inside was not low. He could see it was not. But he brought more anyway, and set it there, and said nothing about it, and went to sit in his chair. She did not thank him. He had not expected it. Outside, the wind had dropped some from the night before. Inside, the fire went on. Both twins were breathing. He had not known that first night whether they would be, and they were. He put that somewhere and didn't take it back out. On the third day, he left food near the fire before going out. Not on the table. He set it on the floor, close to where she kept the twins, where it would be within reach without her having to cross the room. A piece of the grain cake he had made the evening before, and a strip of dried meat. He set it there without looking at where she was sitting, and went out before the light was full. He did not think about it much. The fire needed tending when he was outside anyway, and whoever was tending it would need to eat. He came back at midday to find the porch swept. He stood at the top of the steps and looked at it. The broom was leaning against the wall where it always leaned. The boards were clear. He had not asked. He had not thought to ask. He tried to work out when she would have done it, and decided she had probably used the time when the twins were settled, and she had a reason to step outside for a few minutes. The porch was swept. He set his coat on the hook and went in, and didn't say anything about it. Something in him settled, just slightly. He was not sure what to call what was happening. She was not a guest. She was not hired. She was not explained. She was simply there, and the days were accumulating the way snow does, quietly, without announcement, until you look up and notice how much there is. That evening the food on the floor was gone. He put more out without making ceremony of it. On the fourth day, she held one of the twins out toward him. Not handed. He understood the difference without having to think about it. She was still holding the infant, both arms supporting her, but she had shifted so that the twin was facing him. He stopped what he was doing. She said a word. One word, careful, in her own language. Short. It had a hard sound at the start, something his mouth was not built for, but the meaning was clear. A name. This was the twin's name. He repeated it. He got it badly wrong. He could hear that he had. She looked at him. Something moved across her face that was not quite a smile, but was in that direction, the closest thing he had seen to one. He tried again. A little better. She made a small sound that might have been acknowledgement, and turned the infant back toward her chest. He stood there a moment, then went back to what he had been doing. He did not think about what had just happened until later, and then only briefly. The end of the fourth day was like this. She was trying to tend the smaller twin, who had been fussing on and off since afternoon. The other one was also awake. She had 2 hands and 2 infants, and neither of them was willing to be set down. He was across the room. He saw the situation before she asked for anything, which she did not ask. He crossed to her and reached out his arms. Not with words. Just the reach, the offer of a second pair of hands. She looked at him for a moment. Then she shifted one of them toward him, and he took the infant, careful as he knew how to be, and held her against his chest the way he had seen the woman hold them. The smaller twin made a small sound, but didn't cry. He stood there and held her, and tried not to move too fast. On the other side of the room, the woman settled the other twin with both hands, free at last, and for a few minutes neither of them spoke, because there was nothing that needed saying. The twin's weight was less than he expected, small, even for what she was. He had not held something this small since he could not remember when. He did not say so. On the 5th day she came outside for the first time past the porch. He was at the barn when she came out, working on the east wall. A board had split over winter, and he had been meaning to replace it. He heard the door and did not look around. He waited to hear footsteps return inside. They did not. When he finally looked, she was at the far end of the yard, standing at the broken fence corner. Both twins were inside, left by the fire. She was looking at the fence, the way she had looked at it through the window on the 2nd day. Then she crouched and picked up one of the fallen posts from the ground. She did not look at him to ask if that was all right. She set the end of the post against the earth, at the angle it should have been at, and held it there, sighting along the line of the fence. He climbed down and crossed the yard. They worked the fence together for the better part of an hour without exchanging more than a handful of words, and most of those were not words but gestures. She was stronger than him, not by a little. She knew it, and did not make anything of it. When the post needed driving, she took the driver without him having to say so. She set the post straight and held them while he ran the wire. He found himself handing her things before he had consciously decided to. It was a strange thing to notice about himself. By midday the corner was fixed. 4 posts, wire retightened, the tilted section standing upright again. He stood back and looked at it. She stood back and looked at it. Neither of them said anything about it. They went inside. That night the temperature dropped. He woke in the dark because the cold had come into the room. The fire was low, burned down to coals while they slept. He was on his feet and at the woodpile before he was fully awake, moving on the instinct that had kept him alive through winters alone. She was already awake. She was already holding both infants against her body, one arm around each, the blue blanket pulled over them and her both. She did not make a sound. She did not look at him in a way that said anything. She just held them and waited for the fire to come back. He built the fire up. He built it higher than it had been before they slept. He added wood until the room was warm again, then added more. He did not go back to sleep. He sat in the chair and kept watch on the fire until the grey started showing at the window, and the cold outside had softened some. She stayed where she was. The twins didn't wake. The smaller one, the one who had scared them both that first night, breathed steadily beside the other. He sat and listened to that sound and did not let himself think about what he would have done if the fire had gone lower before either of them woke. In the morning he made a hot drink from the grain he kept for bad weeks, the kind of thing that was not quite coffee, but served the same purpose in winter. He made enough for 2. He set 2 cups on the table. He did not remark on it. He did not look at what he had done. He picked up his own cup and stood at the window and drank it, facing outside, the same as always. But there were 2 cups on the table. It was the first time there had been 2 of anything on that table since the summer before last. She came to the table and took the second cup. She did not say anything. He did not look around. They stood on opposite sides of the room and drank in silence, and the twins slept by the fire, and the day started. It happened the way things happen in small rooms when the night is long. The twins had gone down earlier than usual, and the fire had done the rest. The room was warm, and the light from the hearth was the only light, orange and unsteady, reaching the walls and not quite making it to the corners. He was in his chair. She was on the floor near the sleeping twins, the blue blanket arranged over them both. She had not moved in some time. He had not moved in some time. Neither of them had been planning on talking. She spoke first. She said something in her own language. He had been hearing it for days now, bits and pieces of it when she spoke to the twins, and he had learned to understand the tones, if not the words. This was a different tone, quieter, deliberate. Then she tried his language. A few words, imperfect, placed carefully the way you place your foot on uncertain ground. She made a gesture with one hand, pointing behind her, in the direction she had come from. He watched her hand. He watched her face. She said another word in her tongue, and he did not know it, but he understood what it carried. Someone had been with her when she left. Someone was not here now. He was gone. She had walked because there was nothing to walk back to. He understood her meaning more than her words. She did not say more. She had said the thing, and she was done with it. She folded her hands and looked at the fire, and the room was quiet again, and he sat with what she had told him, the way you sit with something heavy that has been set in your hands, without warning. The fire breathed. The smaller twin shifted in sleep, then settled. Outside, the wind moved under the eaves. He had not talked about May to anyone. He had told himself it was because there had been no one to tell. He was not sure that was all of it. He said her name. May. He said it once, quietly, without looking at the woman across the fire. He had not said it aloud since the funeral. The sound of it in the room was strange to him, like a word from another language. Then he said it had been summer. Not a bad dying. She had been sick for a few weeks, and then she had not been sick any more. The ranch had gotten quiet after that, a quiet he had not known how to fill. He had stopped trying to fill it, and that was how it had stayed, right up until the night the door made a sound. That was as far as he went. She looked at him while he talked. She did not understand the words. She understood what they carried. She did not offer comfort. He did not want it, and would not have known what to do with it. He did not offer any to her for the same reason. They were not the same. The losses were not the same. He would not have said they were. But there was something in the same location, if not the same place, the same country. The word for it in his language and the word for it in hers were probably different, but they were probably pointing at the same thing. He did not say any of that. He did not have the language for it, which was something, because he was the one who had language in this room. The fire crackled. They sat with what had been said. Then one of the twins made a sound in sleep. Something small and uninflected, a sound that meant nothing except that she was alive. Both of them looked. The twin settled. Neither of them spoke again. The room was quiet in a way it had not been before they talked. Not lighter. Not easier. Just different. The thing had been said. And saying a thing is different from carrying it alone, even when the thing itself does not change. Several weeks had passed. The twins were stronger, the smaller one especially. She had rounded out some, the hollow look gone from her face, and she kicked now when she was on her back on the blanket, which meant her legs had found their strength. Both of them made sounds that were not distress. These were new. He had not expected to feel anything in particular about that. He found that he did. The fence corner was fixed. The east wall of the barn was solid. The porch had been swept more than once, and he had stopped noticing whose doing it was, which was something. He was at the barn when he heard the horse, a rider on the road, moving at the pace of a man who was not in a hurry but was not stopping either. Not a man the rancher knew by name, a trader of some kind, by the look of him, or someone with business between one settlement and the next, the kind of figure this road produced a few times a season. He had the look of a man who had ridden this stretch before. The rider slowed. He saw her. She was on the porch with one of the twins, the larger one, who had been fussing in the midday cold and needed the outside air. The woman was standing at the rail. When the horse slowed, she looked at the road. She did not step back. She did not move closer. She was not hiding from being seen. She was not presenting herself either. She just stood there the way someone stands who has decided they are allowed to. The rider stopped at the road's edge. He did not come to the gate. The rancher set down what he was carrying and walked over. They spoke at the gate, not long. The rider's voice was even, the way a voice goes when a man is working through something and trying not to show it. He asked how long she had been here. The rancher told him a few weeks without adding anything to it. The rider looked past him toward the porch. The orc woman was still there, still holding the infant, watching without expression. The infant was awake. She was looking at the rider the way infants look at things that are new, without judgment. The rider did not press for more. He did not have to. His tone made clear that people in the area knew this road, knew who traveled it and who lived off it, and that what he was seeing here would not stay unseen. The rancher said nothing to that. He had nothing to say. The rider touched the brim of his hat and picked up his reins and went on. He did not look back. The rancher stood at the gate for a moment after the horse had gone around the bend. Then he turned and walked back toward the house. She was still on the porch. She had watched the whole thing without moving. When he came close enough, she looked at his face, and whatever she found there told her what she needed to know. She did not ask. He did not say. He did not need to. Whatever the rider had been and whatever his tone had carried, she had read it from the porch without hearing a word of it. Something was coming. They both knew it now. He went inside. She followed, still holding the infant. He set a pot on the stove and went about the afternoon's work without talking about what had just happened on the road, because there was nothing to say that she had not already understood. The fire went on. The twins went on. Outside, the road was empty again, but the road did not stay empty for long in a country where people paid attention. They came on a mid-morning, 3 of them on horses, moving at the kind of pace that announces itself without hurrying. He heard them before he saw them. He was inside, eating the last of the morning's food, when the sound of hooves on frozen ground reached him through the walls. Something about the number of them. He set down his bowl and went to the window. 3 riders. The one in front was a man whose land bordered his to the south, a rancher he had seen twice a year at the most, traded nods with, never spoken to at length. He did not know the other 2. The led man sat his horse with the particular straightness of someone who had decided something before leaving home. The morning was clear. No wind, the kind of winter morning where everything is sharp and sounds carry farther than you expect. He did not hold a weapon. He did not need to. 3 men on a neighbor's road was its own argument. The rancher pulled on his coat and went out. He did not go to the porch. He walked to the gate at the edge of his property and stood at it without opening it, and waited. The lead rider stopped his horse at the far side of the gate. The other two held back a length behind him. The neighbor made his case. He did it without raising his voice. People were uneasy, he said. A thing like this had a way of unsettling the area. Something could happen. He could not speak for what others might do. He was only saying what he had heard, which was that people had concerns, and concerns had a way of turning into problems if they were not addressed. The rancher let him finish. Then he said it was his land. That was the first thing he said. And the second thing he said was that she was not leaving. He said it without heat, the way you say a fact about the weather. He said nothing else. The neighbor shifted on his horse. He tried another direction. There were mechanisms for this kind of thing, he said. A complaint could be filed. There were people in town who handled arrangements when arrangements needed to be made. He was not saying it would come to that. He was only saying. He said it the way a man says things when he is trying to make a threat sound like concern. The rancher said nothing. He stood at the gate and looked at the man and said nothing. The silence stretched. Then the door opened behind him, and he heard her come onto the porch. She didn't come to the gate. She didn't walk toward the horses. She came out with one of the twins and stood at the rail the same way she had stood there before, the same way she stood when she wanted outside air, and she looked at the riders with no more expression than the fence post she was standing beside. She was very large in the morning light. He had stopped noticing that, the way you stop noticing the weight of something you carry every day. The neighbor noticed it now. His horse shifted under him. He did not correct the horse immediately. The two men behind him looked at each other. The neighbor looked from her to the rancher and back again. Something moved in his face. Not quite anything yet. He had come here with a calculation, and the calculation was getting harder to finish. He did not finish it today. That came later. But he pulled his reins and straightened and looked at the rancher with something in his expression that was not surrender, and was meant to look like it was not a retreat either. The rancher did not move. He had nothing to add. He did not ride away immediately. The rancher had said what he had to say. The woman was on the porch. The twins were inside, all but the one against her chest, who was awake and looking at the horses with the uncomplicated attention of something that has not yet learned to be afraid. The silence that followed was not the silence of things being over. It was the silence of a man doing arithmetic. The neighbor's eyes moved, not to the rancher, past him, to the porch, to the woman standing there. He was seeing her fully now, in daylight, for the first time without the blur of distance or a half-second glance. She was taller than any of them, taller than the rancher by a span, taller than either of the two men behind him. She was holding an infant, and she was not moving, and she was the kind of thing that a man's eyes try to make sense of and then stop trying. He had not accounted for this. She did not look at him. She looked past him at something else, in the way of a person who has not yet decided you are worth looking at directly. The neighbor's eyes moved back to the rancher, then to the two men behind him. He counted without counting. 2 men. 1 rancher who had not moved. 1 orc woman who was taller than any of them. The number was not coming out right. He looked at the rancher again. The rancher had not moved, had not reached for anything, had not spoken since the last thing he said. He was simply there, in the way that a man is simply there when he has decided what ground he is standing on and what it is worth to him. He was not braced for a fight. He was something different. He was settled. The neighbor had seen braced men before. This was not that. Something moved across the neighbor's face. Not fear. Fear would have been readable, and he was a man who knew how to hide it. This was something else, a recognition. He had come here expecting to find a man who had made a mistake, and could be shown that the mistake was costly. What he had found instead was a man standing on his own land with an orc woman beside him, and 2 small lives in the house behind him, and none of it read as a mistake from where the neighbor was sitting. He pulled his reins. He did it slowly, the way a man does it when he wants it to look like a choice. He looked at the rancher once more. "We'll see," he said. That was all. 2 words, delivered without inflection, the kind of parting line a man uses when he wants to be sure it travels with the person after he has gone. Then he turned his horse and rode. The other 2 followed without a word. They had not said anything the whole time. That had been its own kind of statement. The rancher stood at the gate and watched them go. He watched until the horses rounded the bend and the sound of them faded, and then he stood there a little longer in the quiet. From the porch she watched too. He knew this without looking back. He did not turn around for a long time. He had not held ground for anything since May died. He had not had anything worth holding ground for. That had been true for 2 years, and today it was not. He stood with that for a moment. He turned around. She was still on the porch. The infant was watching the empty road. He walked toward the house. She watched him come. When he reached the steps, she looked at his face, and whatever she found there was enough, because she nodded once, just slightly, and went inside. He stood on the porch alone. The road was empty. The cold went on. The twins were inside, and the fire was inside, and none of those 3 men were coming back today. He went in and shut the door. The mud came in early spring, which meant the worst was over. The path between the house and the barn turned soft and took thought with each step. He had not minded this year. Mud meant the cold had stopped meaning what it had meant in January. The twins had weight to them now. He noticed this when he held one. There was a solidity that had not been there before, a fullness in the cheeks, a grip when something was offered to a small, reaching hand. The smaller one especially had changed. A month ago, the question had been whether she would live. That was not the question anymore. The days had a shape. He went to the animals in the morning. She worked alongside him when a thing needed more than 1 pair of hands. The twins stayed near the door on a blanket on clear days, in sight of whoever was nearest. He had put a board under the blanket's corner to block the draft. She had shifted it slightly so the blanket centered over it. Neither of them said anything about this. They worked the fence line together twice more when sections needed attention. He had stopped thinking of her strength as something to account for. She had stopped watching his face when she did something he had not asked her to do. Small adjustments. They accumulated. One morning, he stood at the far end of the yard and looked back at the homestead. The fence corner in the southeast was solid. Those posts had gone into half-frozen ground. The roof patch over the south section had held since before she arrived. What was new was the mud, and in the mud were 2 sets of tracks going back and forth in different patterns because they did different things and moved differently. He looked at the tracks. The place had not looked like 2 people's work for a long time. He went inside. The twins were on the blanket in the square of morning light that came through the east window on clear days. The larger one was on her stomach, lifting her head, which she had started doing. The smaller one was looking at the ceiling. Both of them were making sounds. He moved past them toward the stove. The blue blanket was around the smaller twins' legs. He had not looked at it as a thing in itself for some time. It had been washed and washed again, and the color had faded, and the edges had worked soft, and it was the kind of object that had been used every day by hands that were not thinking about it. He stood at the stove and looked at it across the room. He had not decided to give it to anyone. He had pulled it from the chest that first night, and it had not gone back. The chest had been empty since. The blanket was around a child. It was warm. He did not know what to call what was in the room. Not quite a family. That word was too small for what it was, or the wrong shape, or it belonged somewhere else. He did not have another word for it. Maybe there was not one. Maybe that was all right. She came in from outside with one twin on her hip and set something down without looking at him. He moved the kettle. They worked around each other in the small space without speaking about it. The road past the fence was there, the same as it had always been. What came down, it was not something he had ever controlled. The difference was that now there was something here that made the road matter. The twins were on the floor. The kettle was on the stove. He poured water when it was ready. The smoke from the chimney was the first thing you would see coming up the road from the east in the early morning. A thin line of it going straight up in still air, the way smoke goes when the weather is settled. Below it, the homestead. A house, a barn, a fence in better repair than it had been 6 months ago. 2 sets of tracks through the spring mud between the house and the barn, going in different directions because they did different things. In the yard, a large figure and a smaller one, working. Not working at the same task, but working in the same space, each doing what needed doing. From the road, you would not have to know anything about the arrangement to see that it was one. Inside, the twins were on a blanket in the patch of early sun that came through the east window. The larger one had pushed up onto her hands and was holding herself there, working at it the way she worked at everything now, with full attention. The smaller one was on her back, watching the light move on the ceiling. Both of them were making sounds. He came through the room on his way to the door and he stopped. He did not say anything to them. He stood in the patch of light for a moment and watched. The larger one noticed him, and her arms wobbled, and she dropped, and then she pushed back up again. He stayed until she made it. Then he went out. The road was there when he stepped onto the porch. It had always been there. It ran east past the fence and disappeared around the long curve that bent toward the town he did not go to often, and then past that to other towns, other roads, other distances he could not see from where he was standing. The spring air had weight to it that the winter air had not. The neighbor's parting words were somewhere out there. 2 words, and they had a way of traveling. That was the nature of words like that. You could not stop them. He had not spent much time thinking about them. There were other things to think about here. What else traveled was harder to say. The account of what had happened here over winter. The image of the homestead as seen from the road with the smoke and the 2 sets of tracks and the large figure and the smaller one at work. The fact that a rancher out here had opened his door to an orc woman carrying twins in a cold night and had not closed it after. That would travel too. He did not know where it would go or what it would become when it got there. He had not done it for that reason. He had done it because the cold was the cold, and the twins were the twins, and the door was the door. She came out from the barn and crossed the yard. She did not look at the road. She was carrying something, and she went around the side of the house with it. He watched her go. The road went on being the road. The world beyond the fence had not finished moving. He went inside to see about the twins. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe to the channel to watch more stories like this one. Leave a like. It helps the channel a lot. And drop a comment down below. I always read them and use your feedback to make our content better. Thanks so much. Channel